The facilitator this evening will be Miss Josie Wood, our city administrator. I'd like to call this meeting to order if we could all rise for Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Doing roll call this evening, all council members are present except for Councilman Collison. Did notify Ms. Wood and myself that he would be absent, and Councilman Burgley is running late but will be attending. Ms. Wood, if you'd like to take away the welcome and review purpose of goal setting session.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So what we have before you is quite a few items that I've heard from individual council members, some from staff that we'll be reviewing tonight. The purpose of the goal setting session is to develop a consensus to determine priorities for 2020, priorities for the budget for the 2020-2021, and also to provide direction for staff over the next 12 months and even beyond. So my plan is to go through a slideshow presentation. I'll leave it up to you, Mayor and Council, if you'd like me to go through all the items all together in one, and then we'll go back to ask questions and then prioritize, or if you'd like to have discussion as we go through each item, what would your preference be?
I don't care. Quicker.
We'll go through each item. We'll go through each item one at a time and discuss them.
One at a time. Sounds great. All right. So the first slide that I have before you is the 2019 goals and status. So I think it's important to know what we had last year identified as goals and how those were completed throughout the year. This was also in your packet. As you can see, every goal except for one was completed or put on to a time frame that they wanted to discuss in a future budget. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know. Actually, there's two, I should say. Lodging tax and liquor store improvements were the two that we would be evaluating this year. That was identified last year. Any questions on this?
No, can we make a record that Paul Burgley did arrive now?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
The next slide, not much to discuss here, but I just wanted to let all of the council know that these are the plans that we have approved through City Council over the years. This helps guide staff in what we do and the objectives that you have already outlined within approving these plans. Some of them, as you can see, are outdated and they are in the process of being updated. And again, nothing really to discuss, just to let you know that these are things that we look at for council and staff direction. All right, now we get into our items. The first item that we have on the list to discuss is a performance center / amphitheater. This was detailed in your packet, but I have the highlights here. There is a band shell, which was approved in 2011, I believe, that never did get built within Bluebird Park. The approximate cost for this, with looking for inflation, is $240,000 plus. That did not include a bathroom, so we could have a bathroom / concession. There's two options, and costs for this year on those would be approximately $55,000 for an unplumbed latrine, or for a plumbed bathroom / concessions, which it needs a grinder pump, which adds a little bit of cost in there of $200,000. The possible funding source, if the City Council was looking to add this amenity to Bluebird Park, would be through taxes and Fund 920, which is our cash balance.
You said some was approved earlier, and did you build it?
This was never approved.
It was never
Yes, it
approved
was.
to be
It wasn't.
built, but it was. Go ahead.
It wasn't approved to be built, but we had it on for our docket to talk about. That money was shifted over to Legacy Park.
Okay.
Instead of doing the band shell, because I'm just gonna use this word, previous council, thought that the school and the what is it, Hennepin County or wherever that college is in Cambridge.
Ramsey.
If they couldn't use it for their arts and pay us to use it, it wouldn't have been a functional item. I've always thought that Bluebird Park, I feel that our park system is a very nice park system.
Bluebird Park, if you look where we're gonna put that sliding hill in, is a great area. And I think Bluebird Park is a park that we need to make it even better. Rather than building some other parks or some parks that are that aren't getting used, that we gotta put a lot of money in to maintain them, I'd rather divert that money over and do something like this, where eventually one of my great ideas is to have something like Bentleyville and Isani.
Like what?
Like Bentleyville.
It's kind of like Bluebird would be like the Central Park of Isani.
And then, and,
In my opinion, that's what makes it park.
I would agree.
Yep.
I don't know if that's the consensus.
no, I agree it is. And to do something like that, I mean, we don't have to build a Taj Mahal for an amphitheater and bathrooms with the concessions. The whole object is you could get music in the park from the churches, church services could use it. It's a community event thing. And then when you bring in the community, people in the community, they're spending money in this community. You know, you might get, if we did something like Bentleyville, using that as a name, call it Isani Lights or whatever. Those people are gonna come up, stay at the hotel here, then go up to Duluth, up to Bentleyville. Mayor Johnson had, you know, I kind of rolled the ball into his court on this thing, and he did a lot of talking with the guy up in Bentleyville.
And at that time, somebody could vouch because she was on the park and board, she wasn't staff, was Miss Garvey. If you recall, I had that big discussion, and somebody decided to answer a phone call and leave the meeting that day, if you recall that as well. So, yeah, she's gonna X-nay on that. I don't remember that.
But they even said up there that we would feed off each other. You know, there's people come from all over to go to Bentleyville. And it's not because my
Just to
wife.
clarify, that's in Duluth, right? That's the one in Duluth.
Correct.
And Duluth.
I haven't been to
That's
that
the City of Lights in Duluth.
And it was stated that it's because I don't want to take my wife to Duluth. If she wants to go to flippin' Duluth, I'm driving her to Duluth. I mean, it's just, this is something for the community. And I think, you know, the hotel would feed off of it, and I'm sure they would help be a sponsor on it, as well as, you know, Mayor Johnson has done some research on this thing, and he's found sponsors for this, you know, lights in the park.
I found volunteers even.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
So with this, like with this amphitheater, we could set it up with Mr. and Mrs. Claus up there, and people can go up and get their pictures taken. We could have a play set up in there. And, you know, my whole,
What I like to see is right now we have concerts on Main Street. And I think the chief would agree that when you have those concerts on Main Street, it's kind of hard to maintain because Main Street is miles long.
Well, and the event is growing.
And it's getting bigger and
Yep.
bigger to where if we had this and we put it in the park,
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
the chief's going to have better odds of
Controlling it.
controlling and maintaining the crowd. And if it gets bigger, who cares? Bluebird Park is ginormous.
and you know, and the whole thing is too, with that dish in there like that, we wouldn't have to build bleachers per se for people to sit. We could actually step them in concrete, and my thought would be that you can run tubing in there, and in the wintertime or fall, when it's cold out, you can rent one of these ground thawers, and you can run heated lines through it, heated water in it, and people can sit on a heated bench. And I think it's something that this community deserves.
I like the idea. I don't think we need bathrooms. I think we could do porta potties. And I don't think we need a concession stand because that's what we have food trucks for. So it's kind of saving the money on those two items. I think building the band shell would be a fantastic idea.
I would say in phases, I think you need a bathroom.
I agree with Mr. Burgley, but like you said, in phases, and I kind of go along with
But a
Mayor
plan,
Johnson.
but a plan phase, not
Make it,
throw it out there and say, we'll do it someday. We
When
have a
we-
definite time.
So you would build
design
the-
the amphitheater, design it so that it can be added on to it, so it's not like it's another,
So it's better for budgeting purposes, better for,
Yeah.
so we could build a band shell first and then budget the bathrooms later on as an additive,
I would
is what
think
you're
so, yeah.
thinking, Mr. Wrigley?
Yeah.
Mayor
I-
and Council, if I may, one thing to keep in mind as we go through these items, at the end I'll ask you to prioritize, but one of them, something to keep in mind is we don't have to do it all in once. These don't all have to happen next year, but you can direct staff, specifically Mr. Becker, on, we'd like to have this happen within the next 3 years, and he will do the legwork and the math of exactly how that does impact the budget. So you can see, as we're not bonding, but we're saving for the project to happen, you can also have that direction as well.
Let's also keep in mind, Mr. Becker, I did bring this file to your office. That had been kicked around for quite a while, and then it got buried, and I don't want that to happen again. Either we do or we don't. On any of these items, to be honest with you, the community, the city, they all deserve things that they want, and either we are telling them we are or we are not. Let's not kick these things around.
Well, in my personal opinion, I'd like to see this as being a topper priority. Something needs to be done sooner than later. That's just my opinion, but
I would agree with you guys on that. I think doing it in stages would be a better idea, and I think that it looks like a really nice idea, and I like the building, and the cost really isn't that bad. But I would agree that, if we were to do it, I would say skip the bathrooms, just go porta potties, and then do food trucks for the concessions.
Take it in steps.
Yeah, and if you wanted to add that stuff down the road, you could, but the argument I would make is that as a priority, I think I'd like to see the city get out of debt first and put all of our focus on that project as far as just knocking out the debt first, and then saving for some extra things like this. But I like the idea. I mean, I think if I were to go for it, I would go with what you guys were saying about doing it in steps, but I just think timing on it.
Let's also
I'd
keep
like
in
to
mind,
see
though,
it
Councilman
in the
Gordon, that we do have a plan. We have a plan
Right.
to be debt-free.
Right.
Whether we necessarily add and/or budget, we still have that plan.
But, I mean, spending another $240,000 is gonna delay that eventual goal of being debt-free, right?
Well, right now, the plan is to simply maintain the debt schedules, right? So we just simply make those principal and interest payments as they're due and come 2030. I forget if it's February or September, then that would be the last general obligation.
And
bond
for
payment.
us to add anything like this or anything on this list, you would just have to balance, correct?
But the money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't just appear, I mean, it's gotta come from somewhere.
Right, but he balances and works his magical math
Yeah,
numbers.
we can work those things out. So there'd be a couple points on this. It'd be, to the extent that we phase it in, it's easier to get those first parts in, right? So if we say we want to get just the band shell or the amphitheater in, if we're only saving for that portion, that part of the work can happen sooner. If you're saving for concession and restrooms in addition, and you want the whole thing happening at once, then the whole project moves back in time, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, just as a cash flow, understanding how you can actually get that done, that'd be the first thing. Also, to Councilmember Lindine's point, the overall parks budget in Fund 920 is pretty big. I mean, off the top of my head, I think over 20 years, we've got about 1.3 million in expenditures. And some of that is, a large portion of that is going to parks that are maybe underutilized, right? They get used, but maybe some of that maintenance and replacement money is better spent at a destination park.
there's the one park, I believe, is over by the VFW. We could probably go to the VFW and say, do you want this, and maintain it? And we could get rid of that work that we're doing on this thing. I mean, and as long as they do the maintaining of it, we can work something out with them. And that's taking a lot of money out of that maintenance fund that can go to fund this thing. That's just one.
And that is true, Councilmember. Once you prioritize and let us know, those are the things that staff will bring back to committee that has options laid out. So you can see, here's different things that we can do. And that's exactly what Mike would do, is like, if we did not replace the two most in need of replacement parks right now is VFW and Isandy Neighborhood Hills, which used to be Tot Lot. Those are both don't meet standards anymore. Before we dump a lot of money, and it's, probably between the two, a good $50,000-$60,000, maybe we look at doing something else. So we'll bring those options forward.
So,
But this has been on discussion for
It
like
has
6
for-
years.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't disagree. It'd be a nice thing to have, and it'd be a a great place for the community to get together and do things. I like all the things that you're saying. My concern is that, you know, if we can cut some other areas to pay for it, then.
That's
I'm
what I
on
was
board
just
with
gonna
that.
say, was because this is your first goal setting that you've ever attended. I can only speak because it's my second, and Councilman Lundin and Burgley have been to many of them. But what we do is we go through and we'll prioritize what we think. Then it gets kicked back to the staff, and the staff actually will give us options if it's feasible, what it's gonna cost us. They'll do all the homework. And then they'll come back to us again, and then you can voice your concerns then. So for us to just get through the list and what we would like to see in a make-believe world, so to speak, and then it gets kicked back and they do the homework and see if it's feasible.
Sure.
Well, the one question I still have is, we do have a park and rec board. Have they studied this issue, or?
Have you, Ms. Garvey, have you looked at this file or any of, I mean, you would agree with Councilman Lundin, there are some parks that are not very much utilized. I know
I mean
we've
the whole
had
thing,
that.
though, but I mean the amphitheater and all of it.
Have you looked, yeah, have you looked at the Amphitheater file at all?
The file from tonight?
Well, this was in the archives. This is where I found it. And then I handed it to Mr. Becker, and I don't recall if I said, hey, take a look at this or not.
I mean, I've reviewed it just within, you know, the packet for
Okay.
tonight, as well. I don't recall us really talking about it too much on the park board, per se, in the last few years.
No, I don't, we didn't.
Not the last 6 years.
Yeah, but the file was in our cabinets,
Yeah.
is what I was saying. I didn't know if I brought it to your attention. Maybe I talked to so many of you, I forget who I talked to sometimes.
And you could have, and I'm not remembering having a specific.
I don't think we did. I think it was just me and Mr. Becker.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next item. The next one is our lighting infill. So what you can see in the image, the top image in red, the red dots are what we currently have for lighting along Heritage. The second image, the one below, it has green, which could be proposed. There's some standards of putting lights in. Now, we would not have to put in that many lights to make that main corridor. However, you could, but we can do them, and what staff is recommending to phase them in. What you have in front of you is how much it would cost to put 10 commercial lights in, approximately $34,000, and that is including with an approximate install. And then, because I know some people have talked about adding in residential areas, you'll see the approximate cost there per light. And for funding on this one, what we currently have within our capital improvements plan is to replace what lights that are going out. The suggestion would be that we put in additional funds. It could be $10,000 a year, it could be less, it could be more. And then staff would be able to put together what we used to have, which was a lighting infill discussion that we did every year at Public Works Committee. And we would just bring something like that back, where at Committee of the Whole, we would discuss, okay, we now have X amount of dollars, we can do X amount of lights, where do we want to put them? And we would discuss it, and then placement. Any questions on that?
There is a lot of residential streets that need lights.
And currently, we don't have anything budgeted to do at addition.
Now,
We just have
I don't
replacement.
remember, Don, what did we do? When we did that, 5 years ago? What did we do? Do you remember?
Yeah, we have it in the memo we have in 2015. There were 4 commercial and, let's see, 2 Cobra, well, also commercial, and then 2 residential. 2016, we had a couple of each, and then, what?
I said, you are on it today.
And then 2017, there were 3 Cobra head and 3 traditional. So we've kind of stepped it through.
Yeah, we did
over the
something,
years.
though, we worked something out with the utility company on those, didn't we, Don?
Well, it was budgeted for over successive years, and you on the Public Works Committee, served on that as well as Dan did, I believe. And I
Oh, that was me.
Paul was there
Yeah,
at one
I was
point in
there.
time,
It was
too.
Dan and I,
And we decided those priorities then and split it up. And it took 3, if not 4 years to try and get them all in. But we had a large map, and we bit off what we could, including some of the commercial areas.
It's just like in my neighborhood, there's 2 street lights on a long block. And
Yes.
there's 1 street light in a cul-de-sac, which, it lights there, but it ain't nothing over here on this side. I mean, it's, that's what I'm getting at, is I think we gotta start really looking at, start budgeting, setting a budget on this and start doing so many a year to make that happen.
Yeah, so you can see here, we have approximately 10 commercial and 10 residential is about 53,000. So if we did, 10, 15,000 per year, every few years, you're adding 20 new lights.
And Don, maybe you know, or Josie, you too, maybe you know as well, but when we used to do those, you used to come in and we used to talk about this. How much were we spending a year back, 2-3 years ago?
Well, I think the high here that we have in 2015 was 22,000, but it was, $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 a year. And the idea behind this, of course, is to create that entryway into our city, into what really, as we talked about in comprehensive planning, it's our west commercial area, but really part of our downtown, really the downtown for Isanti. So as you look at this, you envision that, because if you drive in now from the south, and I've always said it, it's dark. I mean, other than the commercial lighting from the businesses and some streetlights in there, that's all we have coming in to make that identifier. So it does a couple different things. It enhances safety, and it creates that identity of that commercial area.
Yeah.
And the chief would agree, lighting up the city is a lot better than not.
Okay, we can come back to that at the end. Next one is the reader board or a dynamic sign. So you see 3 different images of ones that are very close to here. So we have East Bethel, Forest Lake, and then Princeton. We have the approximate costs on this. The interesting one with Princeton is that they did a shared 50-50 funding split with the school district. Things to consider in this is where would it go, availability of site. You can see on the East Bethel one that they lease their site, they don't own that land. Possible funding sources for this would be taxes, maybe a partnership with organization, cash balance.
Ms. Woods, is that lease site, is that $74,000 a year? Is that what that is?
Nope, that was total cost to build it.
So they just threw in $74,000 and they were done. They could have it forever?
Right, I'm sure that there's a
It'll just
cost with Connexus or something for electric, I'm sure that there's a meter on there.
Have you thought about,
Ms. Selman said that they actually pay the lease, which is $500 a month to lease the land. But that cost is just the cost for the sign itself.
okay. So have you thought about where it should go? I mean, I'm thinking over where we have our other sign, but do we want it out on the highway?
No,
I want it on the highway.
I'd want it on 65. Right where
The
Sinclair
place that you would
sits,
want
maybe?
to, where you would want to place it, you'd want the optimal exposure and visibility to get the most out of that sign since you're putting so much into it.
Highway 65, either by Sinclair or on the corner there where we have some deal with Mr. Johnson on that corner now.
Correct, we do have just a verbal that he allows us to put up some advertising. You'll see the farmer's market sign there, the banners for the street dance, but he does own that corner, we don't own that. But potentially that could be explored if this is a goal that council wants to look into further.
So would that, see if you're leasing it, it's 70,000?
Well, no, actually, the 70,000 was to build the sign. Those
Okay.
costs up there were to build.
Those
East
amounts you
Bethel
see
pays
there,
$500 a month.
building signs, and then they spend, as Ms. Selman said, $500 a month
So lease it.
to lease the spot where the sign sits. But those prices are to build those signs.
Correct.
Which I like East Bethel's, but that's a hefty little price tag. I think Princeton's looks cheap.
No, it does.
We don't have any right of way out there right now on 65 though, right? So we would have to either work something out or rent space, but
Right.
I
Yeah.
think the price tag is huge. I think
I'll have
it's
Ms.
a
Sullivan
lot of
talk
money.
on that.
Mr. Mayor, there is a little slice of right-of-way that we have on 65 that we could do, but it's north of Heritage
Oh, that's right.
Boulevard.
That's right.
So I don't know that that would really make sense for a location.
Yuck.
But as I mentioned, if this is a goal, we can definitely look into it further of where potential opportunities exist of where we know that
I'm
there's land for
interested
sale.
myself. I'd like to know where the funds are coming from first.
Yeah. Them prices, I'm with Councilman Gordon on them prices.
A lot of money to spend on something that,
But it's gonna be pretty informal. Why is that funny?
I just think it's something that the city, I mean, we could put on our meeting nights and instead of going out and changing, having somebody go out and change that sign lettering and
I know that the city of Cambridge uses the one with the Anoka Ramsey Community College, and they also have even other organizations post on there, so maybe it's something you'd like staff to look into if the chamber's interested.
Get
Finding
somebody
as
to
many
piggyback it with
partnerships
us.
On it would probably be best, not only for the
Jimmy's
city
Pizza
for
Guy
funding,
has
but for the
music,
community for messaging
Yeah.
too. So, we can come back to that if that is.
Better idea, yeah.
Jimmy's Pizza and Isani.
We could put business commercials on it too, and they could pay to get them on
Billboard.
there.
Yeah.
Billboard, yeah.
Okay, the next item is a splash park. This has been discussed in the past as well, but a little bit differently. What we have before you is the cost for two different systems. One of them is to have a water treatment system, which is what Princeton has. That's the one on your left. And you'll see that cost is quite more than the other one. The other one does not have a mini treatment system with it. It actually just uses the water as it comes up, and then it goes down to the storm drain or sewer drain. It is quite considerable. I was told that Cambridge was also exploring this, but that cost is very expensive.
I was also told when we went to a conference in the city of Princeton, if you recall that one, Ms. Wood, Princeton said if they had to do it all over again, they would do things different.
Like not do it at all, or?
No, they would do it.
Yeah.
They would just do it different. So the way I caught on to it was they wouldn't spend that 650,000. They would lean on the 200,000 instead.
It's 34,000 a month to use it though, run that.
And then they went from like a $3 admission to $4, then $5. They just kept raising it to where they should have just went $5 and been done.
Yeah.
And Mayor, I'm not sure if they actually, how much money they bring in, but they do, I think right now they're at like $4 or $5 per person.
From what my understanding is right now they're breaking even, but it's fairly new. So where now over the years, they could be making money on this. I mean, at least they're breaking even.
A lot of people see it as a very good amenity that the community may want, and if we feel that it's going to be highly utilized.
But then you also got to look on there, bathroom and changing. If we did the amphitheater, that bathroom could piggyback up to the amphitheater.
Correct. You'll see it does say there has to be within 750 feet, and that was a Minnesota Department of Health standard, correct?
Correct, yes.
So, this is probably kid use, but we did have that adult use, what was that, a wakeboard park, or
Yep.
what was that called? Was it a
Wakeboard park.
It was a wakeboard
Yeah.
park?
But that was a private.
No, I get that.
The
but-
one that
but-
sank and they buried, is that the one you're talking about?
No,
Councilman
I'm
Wrigley?
just wondering how much people want, and that's why I would lean on the park.
How many
park
children
board
do you
then.
think are in the city of Isani, Councilman Burgley?
Oh, plenty. I'm not saying this wouldn't get used. I'm just,
And then we got other cities all around us that are also very
well,
kid-orientated.
if everybody does it, Cambridge is thinking about it, Princeton already did it.
We do it, Cambridge ain't
Rush,
doing it.
Rush City has
Malacca
one.
has a small one. I will say, I don't think we should compare it to the Wake Park, because that one was very different, and they both had full-time jobs as well, and one was a firefighter for his job, and one did something else, so they were open very sporadic hours, so it was
Right.
hard for the community to get grasp when it would be open.
Thought these guys were sharing their food, but it's gone already on both sides.
There's crowd in there.
I would have a question for Mr. Sylvester on that. How much time are you going to have Public Works working on that thing?
I talked to Princeton. Princeton had their seasonal do the water testing. So if it's a water test, we're probably looking at, get the sample, do the test, half hour a day for staff.
Yeah, and then if some kid pees all over in there or drops a deuce, well, then what do you got to do?
Well, then you have to go
Shut
clean
it
it
down,
up.
clean it.
Yeah, and then
I'm gonna tell
that's
you- I'm
more
gonna tell you,
time.
kids
And
gotta
have to
pee in
get
that
shut
every
down
day,
or whatever
so-
at that point until it was treated done.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
If it's a chlorinated.
You put some 1.5-year-old.
If you went with a treated system, then you would have to shut it down for a while. But if it was an untreated system where it's always fresh water, then you wouldn't have to shut it down because it's constantly fresh water.
You'd still have to clean it, though.
Yes, you would have to clean the surface.
Yeah.
The surface.
This is something I would say too, going back to the other point about the amphitheater, I would like to see us get out of debt first, and then with something like this, because it's such a big price tag, and I think there's people that will use it, but it's not something that your 8-year-old kid is gonna wanna use either, it's like first graders and below are probably gonna use it, and there's not that many people, I think, that would use it, and it's a lot of money to spend, but I think if we were out of debt as a city and, you know, I would put it up for a vote, you know, for the community, let them decide if they want to spend the money on it, but.
Mayor Johnson knows I've been dead set against this thing.
If it,
But I'm gonna tell you right now, I've had more people in the last 3 months says, we need this. And I am utterly shocked. And I said, how bad do you want it? How much do you want to pay for it?
yeah, right.
We need it. And that's their discussion, that's it. But I do agree with you.
I would
think this is something-
entertain to do what Councilman Gordon says, is let the people vote, but I think you're gonna be shocked.
Yep.
I think
Might-
we're gonna
it
end
might
up
be.
paying
Maybe-
for it.
Maybe grandma and grandpa don't have a problem with their property taxes going up to pay for a splash pad.
I think we'll be paying
the
for it.
youngsters. But at least that way, it's not, you know, we just decided to spend that money on a splash pad. I'm not, but I think we should be out of debt before we would even consider doing something like that.
Then we're gonna
One-
wait 20 years.
Well, here's one thing that you look at, and in a conversation with Mr. Becker on this, if we did multiple projects were X amount of dollars for multiple projects, say the amphitheater and the splash pad, what that would affect us, what we would have to, say we borrowed the money to do it, would be minute compared to what you're thinking it would be. It's all these little ones that you keep adding up that hurt more than the one bigger chunk.
Right.
You'd be better off doing it in one lump sum, do all that, and we'd still be able to pay off the debt as it is right now. You know, 1-2 points is nothing. It's 7, 8, 10 points that's a tough one.
Mayor and council, if we, in terms of asking what the public wants, I did look into, or staff did look into, putting it on the ballot to make a question. While you cannot put an advisory question on the ballot, you can put, if the city was seriously considering doing like a general obligation bond for it and borrowing that money, that type of question could be put on there. There are certain ways that you could write it, but that's something that potentially could be done if you want staff to explore that more. There's some rules of when you have to submit it to the county and get approval and this and that. But if you're willing to bond for it, could be potentially a question we could add and get their input. If we're not looking, if say we're looking to just save it along the way, that would be just an advisory question. You cannot put that on a ballot.
Let me ask you something stupid. How about grants? Can the city qualify for a grant for something like this?
There's grant opportunities all the time. Definitely staff can apply for things, whether, I've never looked specifically, Jenny, do you know? Because Ms. Garvey has experience putting together a splash park, so do you know if there's been grants?
Councilmember, in the years of experience I have, I don't ever remember seeing anything specifically for a splash pad aquatics area. There's general recreation ones that it could maybe fall under, but I don't know if I don't recall anything specifically for like splash pads.
Because I know like the fire district, we do a lot of grant writing for applying for things, you know, because there's different areas that they go on that. But if we could apply for a grant for something like the amphitheater and the splash pad, and there's a way to apply for that grant, it's no skin off our nose other than having the grant writer write it.
Councilmember, the next slide, we have the pedestrian bridge, that one. So where I've known that there have been grants available, I've put that into the slide. So just haven't heard of one for this type of one, but.
I would go back to, on this one, I would like to lean a little bit on the Park and Rec Board too, and see, get their opinion.
I don't want this thing.
We can come back. We're going to move on. Pedestrian overpass or bridge. This is something that was originally proposed in 2010 and 2011, with most of the funding was identified through legislation and grants, and Mr. Cook can speak more on this, on specifics, but looking to revive this project will have a total project cost of approximately $4.25 million. From Mr. Cook's analysis, looking at possible grant opportunities, which does cost money to apply for grants, but in the grant scheme, we would hope to get about approximately half of it, so around $2 million. If we were seriously considering this project, grant writing would start this year in 2020, and the earliest that we actually would have funds available for a potential build would be in 2025. Some of those grants you apply now, but you get awarded years down the road.
I was against that bridge from day one. To me, it's in a dumb location. If it was to be anywhere, it should have been on along Heritage Boulevard. It's, to me, is the ultimate spot for it. That's where more people are going to cross that road. if I had small kids, which I don't anymore because I'm old, I would never.
What?
Yeah, I would never have my kids walk from the 6th Avenue there to that school. It's all too much woods, too much, there's too many weird people in this world. I would never allow that. I would never utilize that bridge whatsoever. I would never allow my children or my grandkids to ever use that area.
I would concur. Good idea, bad location, too much money.
Well, you definitely would want it on Heritage Boulevard. I agree with that. So,
I'm not sure. if
But
we
there's a
own any
problem with
enough
that on there
land.
because we discussed that previous council, I'm just gonna use that word, when this was discussed and was all ready to fire and go. I mean, that thing was all but signing the bottom line, done. And then Oberstar lost and then it went all the way. Thank God,
I was
because
gonna
there
say,
was a
that
lot
was
of.
his project, right?
Huh?
That was Oberstar's project,
Yes,
right?
yes. But that thing was all said and done, ready to happen. And if you look to make this thing work, to have it for handicap accessibility, it would actually have to crowd through the hotel to make it work.
No way.
Yes, originally it was supposed to even go where the backside of that hotel, that bridge was supposed to come right along that side and goes up to Hurricane Car Wash and wrapped around, which is, what's the name of that street now? Richard Avenue. It was all coming curling down in there, the way that thing originally was designed. And it was like a 2-mile long bridge. I mean, this thing was long to make it work.
And
Mr.
Councilmember,
Cook?
I believe with the,
I think Mr. Cook wanted to say something like sentences back. Go ahead, buddy.
No, everything's getting covered just fine. The image there actually was a rendering created exactly at that location, and Councilmember Lundin is correct that that ramp there that you can see in that image is or was proposed to be more or less happening along where the current hotel now is. So that green space is where the hotel now is, and so that long ramp. And if you look on the other view.
No, actually, you're wrong. The green space is on the other side, on the east side of 65. Penny Lane is where the hotel is.
Yeah, Penny Lane is no longer,
Right,
but that's where the hotel is.
right.
You're just saying it. I see what you're saying. You're saying
Local
it.
behind-
You're saying it wrong, but you mean right. I see.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you said
but
the
he's
green.
correct. It's a long, this was the linear type ramp. There are helical, type ramps that could be done. The other idea of doing an underpass can still be looked into, where then that would need a long ramp as well to be able to taper down to get underneath the road, or analyze whether actually 65 could get raised. But those types of analysis haven't happened. Same with that topic of along Heritage. Right now, it just doesn't look like there's room for these types of ramps or ramps down or up for that matter, much less the helical type, footprint that would be needed. But none of those analyses have happened at this point. This was the 2010, concept that had been
Yeah.
selected.
No, personally, I think I think it's a great idea, bad location, and just an awful lot of money. And I definitely wouldn't want an underpass. That's just gonna be a crack hangout.
That was my idea, but the chief kind of shot me down on that one too.
all right. The next one will be community events. So this one, there actually is enough budgeting if we were to move events around. So we would not be increasing the budget unless we wanted to keep more than that was being suggested to take away. So what you see on the top table is the existing events. We have Earth Day, Farmers Market, street dances, Jubilee Days, Family Day at Legacy, Curious Creatures, Passport to Parks, and Celebrate Ice Santee. And you'll see in that next column, you'll see some say retain and some say replace. So Passports to Parks would in essence be replaced by Medallion Hunt. It's very similar, yet different, but it gets people involved and gets them out into the park. And then Celebrate Ice Santee is suggested to be replaced with other events to be in coordination with the Jubilee Days and other festivities that has happening. There's very similar things, and Ms. Garvey can talk more on this, but there's similar things that happen at Celebrate Ice Santee that happens during the Jubilee Rodeo Days that maybe the city can just partake and add with those. Then you'll see that there's proposed items of events to add. So breakfast with bunny, egg hunt, medallion hunt I touched on already, adding a parade float, having the city be involved in the parade. Kids events during Bluebird, or in Bluebird for Jubilee, potentially fireworks. I know that that's been discussed in the past. Then into the summer, we have someone who wants to offer free tennis lessons in Matson Park and also rocket building. So why not take advantage of more community things? In December, you could do breakfast with Santa, although Ms. Garvey did want to note that the Isani Primary School did do that this last year, so I'm not sure if we would want to do another one if there's already that event within the community. A candy cane flashlight hunt within one of our parks, continuing on with Family Day at Legacy, but adding also a River Bluff. That's been a very good turnout event that the public seems to really enjoy. They were bummed this last year as we had a couple cancellations for weather and it didn't happen, and really people let us know that they really liked it. And then daytime movie days at the community center, various dates, but it'd be like the old time movie showings.
We could have movies in the park if we had a pavilion.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the medallion hunt is something I brought up about 4 years ago. I don't know if a lot of you remember from around here, but they used to be the Cambridge Swedish Day Festivals, and they had the old snooze can hunt. I don't know whatever happened to the Swedish festival.
We're not that old, Councilman Lundin.
Yeah, but that medallion, or the medallion hunt, the idea was for the rodeo, a belt buckle hunt, because years ago the rodeo used to give away belt buckles for the participants when they'd win.
Well, we should ask the fire department to get into that one.
And my idea behind the medallion hunt or the belt buckle hunt, however you want to phrase it, would be every week in the paper will be a clue to where it's at. Well, if you went to local businesses and everybody's got the POS system in their businesses, 99% of them do, they could have, if you buy this bag of dog food this week at Colburn's, you get, between Monday and Wednesday, you get the clue early. So you go in and they spur whatever, and it helps spur the businesses. And I've talked to a few of the businesses, and they thought that's a great idea.
I actually, I'll be honest, I thought this was a silly idea. But
Which one, the medallion?
the medallion hunt, but I'm going to flop my mind because I was at a conference Friday and Saturday, and many cities do this, Owatonna being one of them that I sat with through the whole conference. And I sat next to the mayor of Owatonna, and the numbers that he showed me that actually reflects on the businesses getting more business, the people that partake in this, was crazy. I was like, geez, you got how many people in that town? And he tells me, and over half of them partake in a medallion hunt. And then it boosts the business by at least a third.
I know, Jenny,
I'm on board.
Parks Board meeting, you were saying that it's just a huge thing. I mean, people go from all over the place to participate, huh?
Yes, Councilman, when I was at a conference this past fall, one session that I went into was specifically about medallion hunts, and I was stunned at how different communities are involved with it and how popular it is at a lot of the communities. Yes.
Well, St. Paul does it huge.
Mr. Jankovic, you remember the Swedish Day Festival for the snooze can? How many people looked for that damn snooze can?
It was always, I remember it being written up in the paper, updates, and it was a big deal.
It was. It was huge. I even went and looked.
No disrespect, Don, but do you remember that too? No? You're not that old either, see?
No, but I mean, you were younger when that was happening, but it was huge. And my idea was, we have the medallion that they search for, and then whoever finds it, we come up with something, whatever.
I think to keep this moving, I think there's some of these we could do without, but I think there's some of these we might want to entertain, gentlemen.
Well, some of these are even our thing, is it? I mean, like the Jubilee Days, that's not a city event, right?
It's not, but what Ms. Garvey's presenting, and if you look at the math, so you look at how much Celebrate Sandy costs the city, that started out as being a joint event, and she said, well, let's look at maximizing our dollars and look at what we don't need to duplicate and be involved with the biggest event that we have going on in town, because currently we don't really do anything. So it'd be adding those in replacement of what we had at Celebrate Sandy.
Like Breakfast with a Bunny, there's so many places in our community that that do that already. Why do we need to do it as a city event?
That egg hunt, I had
That egg hunt now, that might be a different story.
Hundreds
That
of people
might
ask
be
me about
something
it.
we want to take on, or like the medallion hunt. The parade float, I came up with that one. I mean, what better to have this city hall administration partake in building a float for the city? I think they'd have a blast with it. I think it might get a lot out of control, but it would be fun for everybody.
Mike is giggling.
Why not
I
let
was really
the staff
excited
have
about
fun?
And they're both looking at you
Both
like,
those two, coordinators of it.
yeah. I agree. I think breakfast with the bunny is kind of something that isn't really that great. I mean, if we do an egg hunt, which is huge, you'd be surprised how many people would show up for that.
I might ask Ms. Garvey, did you hear something about the BMX and theirs? They used to do one, maybe just share that.
Yeah, Mayor, council member, I had talked to BMX. They had done a egg hunt the last couple years,
10,000.
and they had, what year is it now, 2020? And I think it was 17 and 18, they did not do it in 19. They decided to discontinue doing the egg hunt because of the problems that they had with the egg hunt, and they said they will never do it again.
Like I said, I've had numerous residents ask me about it. Seriously. I mean, I'm not
I'd be
making that up.
curious in what problems they had.
A couple of them were just the children, because they did it inside the BMX building area. And so just the amount of eggs that were trashed throughout the entire facility and stepped upon, and that
I can see
children
that.
just pretty much.
Are these real eggs or
stampeded
plastic
other-
eggs?
Plastic eggs.
Okay.
And then stampeded other children to get at eggs.
Yeah, but this would be something you'd put it, well, other than the trash part of it, you'd be doing it out in the parks or something where you're not gonna get stampeded as much, I wouldn't think,
I
but,
think there's a church in Blaine that does a big egg hunt, and they kind of cordoned off like certain areas for
Yeah.
younger kids and certain areas for older kids, so then they don't have that, you know.
We just have Chief Myers volunteer his time, and he'll control it.
I've been to one.
He can do all the
Mayor,
eggs too.
I
He
have
can
been to
hide
one
the
like
eggs,
that,
too.
but I do want to say that we do have every year that I know of for at least the last 6 years and
Maybe get the
5
fire
years.
chief involved in
But
that too,
the,
Chief Myers?
The Ladies Auxiliary group within the VFW has always done a VFW egg hunt. That's usually in the paper every
That's what I
year.
mean. I think something like that we could get businesses to piggyback us on. It's just where would we coordinate it? How would we control it? How would we not run into those problems? I mean, I think it's worth looking into. I think breakfast with a bunny, I think you just scratch that one off. There's so many in our community that
What
do
about
that
the parade
already.
float?
parade float, I think that's not a bad idea. I think
I think
that,
it's a great idea for our staff.
I think it,
We should pull the staff first, I think.
I think it should be Mr. Becker and Miss Brooks that are the parade float.
Don's clapping, I like, that's a
Travis.
positive.
but the whole thing is with the, the
Put
parade
Chief
float.
Myers in there too. What the heck?
The parade float makes the city staff and the people of the city of Isani staff.
It's a
makes them look
team
human.
building experience.
It makes them look human. And I think that's a perception
You're human?
that people need to see.
Thought you were robots.
Okay, so look into a parade float a little further.
We'd said egg hunt, medallion hunt, parade float, kids event at Bluebird Park in the morning before farmers market. How do you feel about that one, Miss Garvey?
Which one, Farmers Market?
The kids event at Bluebird in the morning before farmers market, similar to Celebrate Isani. Did we get a good turnout for Celebrate Isani?
She said replace it. If you looked at it up there.
So we'd replace.
Mayor and council member, it would be somewhat replacing Celebrate Isani. I only have last year's to kind of, personally consider what the attendance was versus the previous years for Celebrate Isani.
So what was the attendance last year?
And so last year, the attendance did not seem like it was from the previous years. for
So it's
Celebrate
fading.
Isani Day.
I believe last year was the third year. The year before was the first year Isani did it on their own. I don't think it was greatly, hugely attended. I mean, if you were to compare it with the street dance, I mean, that's really well attended, 800 people plus. I think there was maybe a couple hundred people total. The year before, we had Cambridge with us, so it was a little bit different because Cambridge was promoting to come here. Cambridge decided that they wanted to break off and do their own. As you know, they put, not an amphitheater, but a very similar thing as like a band stage in their city park, Cambridge City Park, and they wanted to focus their efforts and funds to having their own events there, so that's why they broke apart after just 1 year.
I have one question, Ms. Garvey. On the proposed list up there, how many of those are yours?
The
Ideas?
Ideas? Hold on, I have to count. 2,
She's gonna count, we're gonna play the guessing game.
Yeah.
8 of them.
My reasoning for asking you that is, this is your forte. I mean, this is what you do.
You're the fun lady, that's what my daughter calls you.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know what's gonna work and what's not.
You know this community just as well as we do.
Yeah.
But this is your forte of expertise.
So, you wanted, on the top list, you're saying replace the Passport to Parks, Celebrate Isani, which I think we can all kind of concur on the medallion hunt, in my opinion. The egg hunt, it's kind of up in the world. I think we could entertain looking at what we can do and see how we can control that a little bit.
The parade float would be a good one.
Parade float's a good one. I agree.
The kids event, I'd look further into it.
I think part of that's just having a presence within Jubilee Days, because we want to get the city involved.
Yeah, I
Yep,
agree.
and I agree. So the rest of them that you have on the bottom, are you thinking that those are all going to be something that's going to work good?
Well, the fireworks, I think I might have mentioned that, even though that it was costing $13,000. A lot of the community asked me why we didn't have our own. Cambridge had their own. Why don't we have our own?
I think we
used
could
to, didn't it?
piggyback
Was
that
it-
with the fire department.
Yeah, it wasn't it,
And I think we could if we ask the fire department and our fine fire chief over there that if he could piggyback on that.
didn't it used to be part of
think
the
they do
Jubilee
it.
Days? Didn't you,
Rodeo.
well,
And if the city kind of piggybacked you and the rodeo on that, I think we could work something out.
I would be all in, and I think I could definitely find enough volunteers to help, but financially, I don't know that the rodeo association is going to agree to.
Well, it's something we can entertain.
We can look further into it, is the point, chief. Free tennis lessons, Miss Garvey, you think we get a good turnout for that?
It's possible. That's where I had a gentleman, a professional tennis coach, approach me with that option in this year. So that's why I put that in there.
Rocket building, I don't even know.
Another resident that had approached me with offering this as a free class. He was a old high school teacher and presented this idea of.
So I guess my question would be, why is it costing us $100 then if it's free?
Well, because we still have to buy some supplies and advertise.
Okay, I get you.
But we could say yes to everything on that bottom part. I mean, just for the most part. We could try it, and if it doesn't work, then we can phase it out next year. I guess you've all heard me say this more than once. This is a community. It's not the city of Isani. It's a community.
I didn't hear that. What'd you say?
You mean straight slapped? So I mean that's the huge thing, and that's just what I look at. I think the more that the city of Isani puts their face into things, people more appreciate it.
And I think, I mean, if we cut those other things and we try some other new things, then, as long as we're spending the same amount of money and we're trying ideas that might work better than what we've been doing in the past, then it sounds good to me. I think Jenny's doing a good job, and I trust her opinion on that.
I think Councilman Gordon and Mr. Becker should hang out more often.
Okay, so the next item, we'll move on
Yeah, we get
to,
along good.
Oh, I know.
He wants to get out of debt just as bad as I do.
the next item is to discuss implementing a lodging tax. So what's on the first bullet there is state statute. There are quite a few requirements for this. If a lodging tax is created by a city ordinance, it is capped at a maximum of 5% of the rent charge. There was some work done back in 2018 by the EDA intern on approximately what could fully be generated by implementing a lodging tax, and it was roughly 35,000. Now, that's all speculation based off numbers that were not actually hard numbers. They were just estimates. So that may not be a truth number, but there is where the city would have to develop, or in partnership with someone like the chamber, for example, a tourism bureau, and putting together a panel. There would take staff involved time with that. We'd get 5% to spend on marketing. There's quite a bit involved with it, and I'll ask Ms. Selman to speak on it if you have any questions of implementing this.
Have we checked with our hotel on this lodging tax?
I don't know if you remember, and I know you sat through a lot of those meetings. Lodging tax through the whole hotel discussion was always discussed.
Yeah, I remember it.
I would like to clarify, because I did see something posted or shared publicly that this would be to offset financial costs that the city contribute to the hotel, which that is not correct.
That's funny.
This is spent, and it's very strictly regulated on what you can use by state statute, and it is for marketing purposes. You cannot use it to offset funds that were, so to say, subsidized to the hotel.
Well, I will tell you, Mr. Sullivan sat there in many meetings and said, that we can collect this lodging tax. This was always in that discussion of that hotel project, always was. I'll guarantee you that.
That 35,000, is that a year or is that a month or what?
Well, that's facetiously speaking. That's
Well, I get it, it says potential, I get it's not.
annually, though.
Annually.
So once
Oh.
a year.
And that's off of figures. Anytime somebody does a study on something,
Well, it says potential, I get it's
yeah.
not actual.
But what she was referring to though is those numbers were based on that having a 60% occupancy. And, so that was what that was.
So what I would recommend on this item, if council would like to look into this further of what it would all entail, I suggest that we direct that back to staff to look into it further.
Okay, let's move on.
Well, I think it's always part of the discussion, so I would say, let's look into it further.
Okay, let's move on.
The next one is a housing study. So I believe that this was shared by Mr. Lorisong in talking about comp plan items at a planning commission. The last housing study was done in 2015, and that was a joint collaboration with the East Central Regional Housing Group. It cost the city approximately $3,000 if that was our share. There was a number of other entities that went into that as well. If the city was looking to do their own housing study, it'd be between 10 and 20,000, so it can get quite considerable for a full one just for the city of Isani. And any questions on this, I'll direct to Ms. Selman if you'd like to look into that further.
Well, what did we find out from the study that we would do it again? Ms. Selman?
Mr. Mayor, the study goes out to the year 2025. That's what the housing numbers are based on, out to the year 2025.
But I mean, what did we learn? We learned that we have housing numbers. What did we learn by spending $3,000? I just want to know what we learned. Did we learn anything?
Well, the housing study provided current numbers, projections on need. There's a need for senior, need for multi-housing. That's basically what it was.
It's something that most cities do all the time. They want to keep that study up to know that if we have to rezone a certain area for multiple housing versus single-family housing, I think it's a good idea. I think it's something that I think it's a necessity for the growth of the city.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just want to know what we learned. Did you think we learned anything, Don?
Well, we did, and Ms. Selman talked about that basically that it supported the need for multifamily housing and then senior housing within the city.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing though with the update. Cambridge has gone ahead and built a substantial amount of multifamily housing. So the question becomes, did they take our share, some of that capacity into Cambridge? We don't know that. And I think it's important to have new numbers to verify what is needed in Isanti.
Thank
I'd
you.
say we go along with it. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
How often do they, when you have a developer come in, do they ask for this every time, or is it just every once in a while, or, if I was a developer and I wanted to know if I should build multifamily housing units, I could look on Craigslist and see what the rent is going for, and I could figure it out pretty quick if I can afford to build it or not, but But I mean, I think this information probably is valuable, but is it requested quite a bit, or?
Mr. Mayor, in my experience, if a developer is actively looking to build
like my question?
multifamily or senior, they will do their own study. They will have their own numbers. It is a good tool for cities to have when you want to recruit types of things, or when developers are asking for assistance. It's a good thing to have, or when you're doing a comp plan update, or you're doing a rezoning, you're thinking of a area, oh, should we change that to, to multifamily, or kind of those long-range plans. But in the short term, typically, a developer will have their own study.
Okay.
But I think,
Something to dwell on, for sure.
Well, staff recommended, I guess I just want to know why, and I think it has valid reasons, so I think we should consider it.
Mayor and Council, I think that we should, as staff, look into if the Regional Housing Group is interested in doing another update, that we can
Jump on
piggyback
board.
'cause
Piggyback?
we don't know that answer currently.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
I would agree.
Okay, move forward.
Next one, this is an item that has been discussed numerous times over the years, and that is to.
You skipped one.
9.
You skipped
The
9.
chief, they should get a shot.
I think I reorganized these, so. it's
Really
on there.
good.
You've been moved down the agenda.
You've been moved down, chief, sorry.
My bad, you're 2 slides down. Kick 'em out. Okay, so,
I can't even get it out. I was going to say, Chief Myers, you want to remove Chief Jankovich, please?
all right,
Remove chief.
Chief, remove the chief.
It'll be a good wrestling match anyway, right?
I apologize that I did not reorganize my agenda. So we're gonna go with the Isani Liquor Store. It's been discussed over the years whether to do a new store, to do an outlook of should we expand, what can we do? And when staff dug into this further, and Mr. Jacoby can talk on this, it was, let's find out what we really could have as options. And what he looked at was 3 different consulting firms to actually do a study to tell us what will be in our best interest and things to consider. I think what I've heard over the years is it's been thrashed out around a lot with no real numbers of what could it mean if we had this size store versus this size store. What actually size store can we put on our current lot? So the studies have varying costs, but approximately $30,000 to get the full study done. And I've seen what I believe it was Lakeville had, and it was, so did Mike Becker also looked at it as well, and it was very comprehensive.
I will tell you this, I am not in favor of building a new liquor store. I'll tell you that right off the bat.
Well, that's what we're gonna use this consulting group to actually tell us what they think what we need to do. So if we add on to the store, what it's gonna cost, what we may gain. It's very comprehensive, just like Josie was saying.
There again,
So we're going to spend $30,000 to have this firm come in and probably tell us what you could.
Well, but here's the issue. So I'm not an expert. I've been in retail a long time. I can't tell you that 2,000 square feet is going to gain me $2 million.
Yeah, but-
I have no idea.
But John, you could guess.
No.
Yeah, you could guess.
Well, I could go guess.
And we could all guess, don't get me wrong, as well as you could.
Yeah, I
To where
could
if you
guess.
were updated and you were given a little more room, could you bring a little more profit into the city?
Well, but the thing is with these consulting firms, their job is to find contractors. They help-
$30,000.
They help coordinate the whole effort. It's a big thing. So, I mean, and Josie can, or I can share it with you too, this plan. And it goes everything through how much they think we're gonna do in sales per year in the next 3 years, forecast population. It's in depth. And I realize it is a lot of money, but I'm telling you, I guarantee you and the reason I'm using them, and the 3 that I had, is Lakeville's building a new store this year, and Brooklyn Center's building a new store this year. They've used all 3. So they got a really good report. They told them exactly what they needed to do. These consulting groups actually help buy land if that's the case, if we wanted to change where we're at. There's a lot of different things that they can do to help coordinate it. They'll actually go in front of city council, tell you how much it's gonna cost to add on to the store, tell you how much it's gonna cost for a new store. It's very, very, very in-depth. Actually, the original report is 300+ pages. That's how good it is.
You know, I think as much money as the liquor store brings into the city, you know, John's been here, I think, longer than I've been here, and he's, I sat on the liquor store committee with Don and Councilman Collison, and the and the numbers have always gone up, so I think it's worth, I don't know, I'm not gonna say it's worth 30,000, but I think it's worth at least considering looking at spending something on figuring out what we should do exactly.
And I think the main thing is we, Mike has talked to me about it, and Josie as well, we can use liquor store funds to fund this, to realize, because I want somebody to actually lay out a plan and say,
Yeah.
if you add this based on your population, we think you're gonna do this. And the other thing is there's so many ADA issues, and we've talked about this. I have a counter that isn't ADA compliant, I got a bathroom that's not ADA compliant. I got an office that's not ADA compliant, so if someone came and worked for me that was in a wheelchair, I can't even access them in the store I'm currently in. So there's a lot of things within that store that I have to correct in order for us to move on there. So,
Those are issues that, I don't need to pay $30,000 to correct those issues.
and I understand, it is a big figure, and I'm not disputing that.
No,
Councilman Lundin, but I honestly, with that these groups can do, it's unbelievable. And the thing is, I don't know what contractor, if we were gonna add onto the store, I don't know who we would use, how much it would cost. These guys do the bidding, they actually will present in front of council.
Well,
Exactly what we need.
I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of contractors that go in your liquor store and spend a lot of flipping money in there. And I'd sure hate to have them be blown out of this door because those three yahoos are gonna tell them to hire somebody from down in the cities. It's gonna cost us a hell. John, just hear me out. I've been doing this for 50 years. And Jason, no offense, architects, engineers, and consulting firms are the biggest thieves there is in this world. They never lose. They screw up, the consumer pays for it. I don't care. I know this for a fact.
Well, I understand.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, $30,000, I'm gonna sound like Jimmy Gordon. I wanna see us get out of debt before I go spend 30 grand. I grant it, the liquor store puts a lot of money in that general fund, but that general fund money goes in to help other things that the city needs to have.
And I understand that.
I see 30 grand and I'm thinking, dude, you just gave me a heart attack.
Up to 30 grand, Councilman
It
Lundin.
doesn't mean it's gonna cost
Doesn't
that.
mean it's gonna cost that.
Okay, $29,999, because I just kept it under the 30 grand. I'm just telling you, I see it way too many times. And they're gonna over-engineer things that don't need to be done. I have all the faith in the world that you're making that liquor store be very profitable. And I give you a lot of credit for what you do over there, trust me. Do you need to do something there? Absolutely. That 30 grand would come off of the cost of what it would do to expand that or build a new building.
But also,
Where that could go for $30,000 could go for a lot of expenditures in that building that you need. That we
but
wouldn't have to cut out.
also, Councilman Lundin, I also see what he's saying, that in his expertise, he has seen other experts like himself use this firm. I don't like that $30,000 price tag either. But I also see what he's saying, that if they were to bring this in, do they necessarily regulate who you can have build there, John?
Oh, yeah, they do all that, yeah.
Although, Mayor and Council, I do want to say that staff can do their own bids, and we can even work with our engineering firm to get builders to build things like we did BMX, that was all on our own. So we don't need to use who they recommend. The reason for doing the study like this was to have some sort of certainty that if we were to expand and not just do a remodel or do a new store, is it warranted? Do we have enough funds that would come in to cover the cost if we were to do a bond for such a project or something like that? So that's where that, now if council is all in agreement that we never want to see a new store, we never want to see expand, we just want you to remodel what you have, that gives staff the direction. But over the years, both those things of expanding in a new store has been thrashed around.
Remodeling what he has is not
gonna help.
enough.
No, he needs to
expand, most definitely.
He needs to expand. I agree
remodel
with
and
that.
expand.
I think there's.
But do we need these people to come in here and tell us that? I guess, I mean, I see Councilman Lundy's argument, but John, I see your argument too. I'm trying to play the middleman here.
It is-
Do we really need this firm to come in and tell us what we know?
Well, I think that,
I think there's a lot that they're gonna tell us that we don't know. I think that's the main thing.
exactly.
That's the main thing.
I'm in business for myself, and I spend money to make money, and I'm not saying I'm gonna go spend $30,000, you know, but a liquor store and a chiropractic office are two different things, but I do spend money to make money. And, you know, I hire consultants and different things, and
Councilman Gordon, you own your own business. You spend money to make money, correct?
But you also gotta remember, the two cities he's talking to have a hell of a lot bigger budget to operate than we do. Brooklyn Park, Lakeville, huge, huge.
I just spoke
Huge.
to the Brooklyn Park mayor and,
Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Center.
Brooklyn Center, same thing.
oh, okay. I didn't speak
John,
to Brooklyn.
I mean, they had their busiest, I will say this, they had their busiest day, you know, when we're looking at those dollar amounts, when you put them in perspective, for what they do in sales, that's not a lot of money for them to spend. I mean, they had one day where they did 29,000 in sales on the 31st of December, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, when you look at it like that, we're gonna spend, but at the same time, I mean, that being said, if it was my personal liquor store and it was my business, I know that, you know, we probably need to remodel and that, you know, we maybe wanna add on, but I would never spend $30,000 for them to tell me something, you know, that I already know.
knew.
Yeah, right. And one thing I will say about Brooklyn Park and Lakeville, I don't know for sure, but do they have other liquor stores that are not city-owned liquor stores that they're competing with?
Well, in that case, no, because they're a municipality like us. They just,
The city of Isani has cornered this market.
Right, and that would be my main thing, is that I think we're getting most of what we would get regardless of what we do. I mean,
Now, if we remodeled and gave you a little more room, I think we could squeeze more lemon juice out of that lemon.
well, I understand, but, you know, just like Josie and I and Mike discussed, that parking lot, we're already outgrowing the parking lot. So, and we're outgrowing the store. And the thing is, and I've said this since I've started, I've been here almost 8 years. That store has made money all 8 years I've been there, but we haven't plateaued yet. We haven't hit the top, and I don't know what the top is. So, there is sales per dollar, we're already 3 times a normal store. So I don't know if you know that. 2,200 square feet, normal per square footage is about $165 a square foot. So figure that out. We're blowing it. We're 3 times more out of that store. Is there more potential? Sure, but I don't know the answer. And I realize, and I know it's a lot to bite off when you see that $30,000 figure, but I think these guys, from what I've talked with these stores, and granted, Brooklyn Center is adding a store, so they'll have 3 stores. Lakeville's adding a store, they'll have 4 stores. So I realize their communities are huge. Their bill's a lot higher than that, I guarantee you that.
We could potentially add another store right there by expanding and remodeling.
We could end up doubling your floor space, and then you could come up and say, I'm not making it with this, I need more. I mean, there's gotta be a bottom line. The next thing you know, you're gonna want a 3-story building. I mean, come on, John, I mean, you understand where I'm going with this?
I know.
If we doubled the size of that building, which could be done, which the city still does the city still have that other half of that lot next to them?
We just have the lot that has where the farmer's market is. where
Yep, and
those
that's the
trees
other
are.
half, because the way that building was put on half the lot originally.
Yes.
So, Mayor and Council, my recommendation may be if we, on this item, is perhaps staff work with Mr. Cook, Bolton Inc., and see what the capacity of that lot with the parking lot and a building expand would be, to see how much more room that gives us, because we currently don't even know that. Does that?
I think that's,
Is there-
I
is there
think that's a good
consensus for
start.
that?
Let's start with that
Okay.
and go from there.
Sounds good. Next item is public safety building. So this is looking at a couple different things. One of them, I'm not sure if you remember, but there was a discussion about having more space, which would be somewhat of a cold storage, mid-storage.
I don't want to cut you off, Ms. Wood, but I need to let the council know this, that we're kind of, in my eyes, starting out of order on this item. We should have went to the fire department first. And the reason I say that is the fire department's interested in buying the building that they're currently in. So with that being said, where do we put our police? That's why this discussion's coming up. Plus, Public Works doesn't have enough room, and we all know that already. So again, that's why this item's coming up. Sorry, Ms. Wood, now you can continue.
That's fine. So it's to have a public works slash PD 50-degree or so storage, more like that cold storage. Replacing our salt shed, because a lot of our salt ends up going down the curb line and into our storm sewer, which is not good, and maybe I didn't say that publicly. Then we have, which Mayor just spoke about, which is adding in a police department that would have its own access, but then they have secured storage behind. So sometimes they do need to utilize putting forfeiture vehicles behind those gates so they don't get broken into. Currently, they do have the little red shed, which is just south of Isani Parkway, and Public Works has a shed. Those don't meet compliance
They're not
standards
very
for
safe.
buildings, so it would be removing those.
Trust
which
me,
had-
they're not
had-
secure either.
Had been a plan to remove those for a number of years as well, but you have to have a place to put all that stuff. As you may know, Public Works puts their things in very interesting locations to make sure that they are out of the elements so we can preserve their life as long as possible. You see that there are some costs there. Public Works storage is approximately $2 million, salt storage $125,000. Police Department building is at 2 to 2.5. That one obviously would have bathrooms and plumbing and water brought to that, but not the shed. Possible funding sources for this would be, we would utilize our enterprise funds, which would be sewer, water, storm, where we could for part of it, and we could use taxing, or we could look at bonding for this bigger type project as well.
There could be grants out for this.
I did reach out, Jason, Mr. Cook looked into that a little bit. Maybe Travis said something on that. Not sure how much grant availability, we definitely would look into it, but weren't able to find a whole lot.
LMC just told me this past weekend there was grants for that.
Oh,
So,
well, then we would definitely look into
yeah.
that.
And it's more so for the police department than Public Works, but
Right.
every little
Everything
bit counts.
Mayor Johnson and I have discussed this after fire district meeting, and I told him, as you already know, Mayor Johnson, I told him to slam on his brakes a little bit, because he wanted to do it tomorrow. I said, this is a 5-year project. This is not something that can happen overnight. We have to fund this, we gotta come up with the funding. I've talked to Chief Jankovich about this, and we've kinda have some outlooks to make this thing feasible. You know, we sell that building to the fire department, which that funding could go back to this. You know, and we're, asking the fire district to come up with the kind of money, I mean, we'd have to do a, feasible study on how much that building's worth. That has to be done. We have to get an appraised value of that building to start with. And by no means am I out to say, okay, the appraised value is at $1.9 million, now you're paying 2.6. No. We're not playing that game. I'm not gonna do that. That fire department's part of this city, no matter what. I do agree, and I think Chief Myers can contest to this. They need more space. Public Works definitely needs more space. The fire department needs more space.
All the city is doing is growing.
Yep.
And in order for our entities within the city to grow, we have to take steps like this.
But I think this is a good 5-year plan, Say best case scenario, three to 5 year plan to make this work. I think this is something that we should, really start entertaining and looking at into doing. I'm not for spending that kind of money, as already heard me with our liquor store, but this is something that has to be done, and I do, and again, for John's benefit, we do need to do something at the liquor store too. So, Mr. Becker would have to do some numbers work and crunching on this, how we can make this work. Maybe possibly we could tie a bunch of things together with this funding that if we have to bond it, we can bond everything at once rather than taking a small bond, whatever, and make it still work in our plan for our getting debt free. And I'm not that financial wizard, so I can't answer those questions for you, but I think this is something that needs to be done.
Another thing that this does, I do want to bring up is, it's on one of the bullets at the very end, but rate study is going to be completed this year. And depending on what choices we do with this, because I know I've heard lowering rate studies, but if we were or were not to bond, this is something that Mr. Becker would look into how it does affect those rates. So we don't have any numbers today for that, obviously, but we would bring that information forward. We can go back to that item, but we'll talk about the fire district here. So, as you know, 2015, the fire district began paying an annual lease payment, which had previously been $1 annually.
Okay.
So you can see there below, what we have collected from 2015 to 2019 is a little over 163,000. Future collections, these are, if we were to keep it the same and not change it, you see that number there is potentially another income of 326,000 up to 2029 over the next 9 years.
That's too much.
That's
feel
just
like
if we
we're
did not
robbing our
change
fire
anything,
department
just
now.
to give perspective. The city, or the fire district did approach the city and inquire about, you know, what we were looking to do long-term with that building, and potentially had an interest in purchasing that. I don't want to speak for them. They are here. All that we know right now is that the estimated market value for that whole entire parcel is $495,000. Staff hasn't looked into it more than that, so looking for direction on.
Now, one thing you have to realize, this money that we collected, the city's paid 48% of that back. We pay 48% of what the fire district lease says. It's, what is it, 36,000, 38,000, what is it? 32,600. City of Isani's paying 48% of that. We're billing ourselves 48%.
Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I think, in my opinion, I would like to go back to our original lease agreement with the fire district. What's that?
It was a buck.
It was a buck. But, now listen, the fire district at that point took on all maintenance of that building.
So we could shift back to it.
So here's the thing that I disagree with the current lease. It's a ludicrous lease. There is no lease that I can tell you that the building, the shell of that building, the leasing company or the owner of the building is responsible for that exterior of that building, that shell of that building. Always, 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 always. Previous council decided that the fire district was going to pay this kind of money plus pay for the building to be maintained. The city of Isani owns that building. The Isani Fire District does not.
Yet.
Well, as we'd like to see. But the whole point of that is we're charging them, which we're paying 48% of back, plus we're charging them to fix a building that's the city owned, which then again, the city's still paying 48% of that because they have to budget it, and that changes our budget, makes our budget go up even higher in the city. It was done that way, changed to that $32,000 lease because the previous council said, if the joint powers agreement doesn't want to work with me, I'm going to make them work with me.
No.
And that's how that came about. Otherwise, it would have still been $1. And as far as I'm concerned, if that's the least that we can do, with them entertaining the thought of purchasing that building, I think that's the way that's the direction we should go. I think we should change that lease to $1 annually again. They'll maintain the inside of that building and the exterior of that building.
Mayor and Council, if I may, one thing to consider is, not that I'm not against, or not for that, but with the current payments that we take in, if we were to offer like a lease-to-own agreement between the fire district and the city of Isani, payments that are made, that and whatever it be set at could go towards the lease-to-own over the years.
And that's something that Chief Jankovich and I have discussed also. And I'm not
like
opposed to
that idea too.
I like that idea. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm one of 5. I'm for the lease-to-own purchase thing on that, and then that gives us time to take that money, roll it in, to do the changing of the police department and doing the work over at Public Works.
So that would ex-nay you going back to $1 though.
Well, but now that
But at least he's making payments for lease to own.
lease to own, is that something, Mr. Jankovich, that you'd be entertained doing?
So instead of we could easily shift to $1 and you maintain everything, or you can just keep it as is and do the lease to own.
I would rather start paying down some of that.
There we go.
And we would have
I'd be
to
for
have
that.
our attorneys and everything look at it and come to an agreement on it. You know, they said the market value is 495,000 on that piece of property. We'd have to look at that, and that'd have to be brought out to whatever we determine, if it's 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever.
Is that feasible to our money man, Mr. Becker?
Lease to own, I think, would be the best situation for both entities.
Yep,
Very good.
I agree.
It alleviates any issues with the fire district having to come up with a large lump sum of money at one time. Also in that role, we end up kind of being the banker, right? By providing them terms. Again, that gets them off the hook from having to potentially find another agency or a bank or whatever that would step in and fulfill that role. So I think that's a good arrangement for both. Additionally, if we're going to sell the building to the fire district, the big question becomes, well, where does the PD go? In a lease-to-own arrangement, that buys us time and funding to help solve that problem.
Yep.
You know, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever, I don't know what the intent of the fire district is. I don't know what their timeline is, but I'm sure there's got to be a way that we can come to something that works for both entities, but I think lease-to-own is the right way to go.
We would have to have the fire district's attorney and our attorney get together and do the verbiage correctly so that the PD is still there and operating until we can get a building or something done. And that's, you know, Mr. Jenkins, this would be something that we'd have to bring back to council and vote on again. But, you know, if we are all in agreement at this point, you know, you don't kind of know where you stand, but we can't, that's not something we can take action on tonight anyway. So, but that, I guess, if you're entertaining that, I would suggest that we do a lease to own for them. If we can come up to an understanding with the PD still being in there till we can fund that other building.
The rest of the council up to par for that?
Go ahead, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I just want to know, how old is that observed estimated market value? How old is that, the highest observed?
Didn't we just get that figure, Ms. Wood?
219.
No, that's not the 2019 value. That was the highest amount over the last 5 years. If I remember, if you go back 5 years, it was a little below that. I think it was.
Are you wondering what the building's
4 years
worth?
back,
Is that
it
what
was
you're
about.
asking?
I'm just wondering if that's what the building's worth.
4 years back, it was about 495,
Okay,
and currently, I want to say it was 481. Like in the most recent. State statute says that the county assessor needs to be assessing that all properties at between 90 and 105% of the fair market value. Whether or not they're hitting that number correctly or not, I don't know, but that's what they're charged with by statute. So.
Yeah, I would probably entertain, you know, if the fire district, and I'm not trying to throw something on them, but it sure helps the city out if the fire department we come to an agreement when we do this, that they would pay for an assessment on the building cost worthy. I don't know how much they charge on a commercial property, but I think on residential, it's like $350, $400 market, you know, appraisal value. Yeah, so I mean, we can look into that, but I mean, now we can get the wheel started, and I think staff can maybe talk more with Mr. Jankovic and our attorney, and then we can make a vote on that in termination, and once we have some kind of lettering.
Can we cut his mic off? Mr. Burgley, did they answer your question?
yeah, it's 5 years old, right?
I think I think it's 4.
Okay. 4
And
years.
since then, it's just stepped down slightly since.
So it's worth a little less. Is that what you're being?
According to the county, yeah.
Okay.
481,
we're
you said, I think.
You know, we're talking a $10,000 difference, but yeah.
Okay.
So it's give or take, but it's
Sure,
close.
Sure, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I'm just being presented with this tonight. You know, I'm not saying I'm opposed for that. I was, you know, I always thought that, that with the previous administration, we were kind of at odds with the fire department anyway, and so.
Not anymore.
Well, I know that, but I'm saying, that's my next point. You know, there's no reason why we have to be at odds with the fire department.
Not at all. We're here to work together. We're a team.
So if that's what's gonna work best for both, I mean, I trust Mike on this, so.
My argument, I guess, is that we're both growing, the PD and the fire department, and our community, as we've heard tonight, and we're talking about expanding the liquor store and getting more studies to see how our community is growing, we're both
Busting at the seams.
We are. He's parking outside. We've got apparatus parked outside. I've got a boat hanging on the wall. We're maxed out for office space. You obviously are. You're in our lunchroom, or in our meeting room with your lunchroom, so.
That was part of the contract, chief. Come on.
New liquor store building.
I'm more than happy to continue to work, but I don't know that this is going to continue to function for the next 5, 10, 20 years.
New liquor store building, and then you can use mine. See?
That is one idea I want to at least float here. I mean, not that the council needs to make this decision, but to my mind, I don't really want to bond $2 million for a new public safety building. No offense, chief. But for public works storage building, we can split that cost, not just through tax levy through the streets department, but also through the enterprise funds, right? I can mitigate the risk of increasing the levy and mitigate the risk of having to actually bond for that particular project. The public safety building is a different deal. That's $2 million. I don't have other sources. It's pretty much you either sock it away over a lot of years or you bond. There's not really another way around that. However, if we lease to own with the fire department, and suddenly the police department needs another space to go, and if we choose to spend $30,000 and find that building a new store on the east side of 65 is worthwhile for John, the city now has another building on Heritage that is now vacant. And could, through some of the funds that we get from the fire department, become a place for the PD.
Yeah, but then you're going to build onto that building for the police department.
I'm not saying it's a decision to be made today, but from my mind is an effort to avoid bonding and work with the resources that we have. Now, don't get me wrong, in that scenario, if you were to build a new liquor store, you would bond for that. The difference being is that those would not just be geo bonds where you are paying for that through a tax levy. In that scenario, you'd use EDA revenue bonds, would be the issuing authority, and you would pay for those bonds through the revenues that John collects at the store. Hence, the need for the study to determine if there is that kind of additional revenue to be had to make those debt payments and still maintain the $350,000 transfer to the general fund. But that's at least one scenario where all these different kind of seeming 3 or 4 different topics start to kind of puzzle piece together a little bit.
But if the fire department works with us, then we could probably work with the liquor store to work with the police department. I see what you're saying. We could all piggyback one another, and hopefully it all comes out in the end.
Yeah, and suddenly you have money to change that existing liquor store into something that might work for PD. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but.
2 new places to put your dynamic sign.
Oh, now the chief's throwing the sign in there. Where's the splash park fit in there? Or the amphitheater? Come on. We got puzzles going together here.
And just to, go ahead, please.
Well, I thought in the past, and I could be wrong about that, but was there ever talk of the fire department building another building at all too? I mean, what was the cost for that? I mean, versus buying this one? And
I know those numbers, chief. You can go ahead and tell them.
If the fire department built their own building and we had this one, then the police department could expand into the existing building we have, right? So, I mean, what would the cost be to do just a fire department building where if you guys just went and we did our own building for the fire department?
Oh, we did. Chief, would you care to comment on that?
It would be quite a bit more than the estimated $495,000. It would be a lot more.
Wouldn't it be like 2.5 million?
It could be easily 2.5 million. The thing that I think is the biggest piece of staying where we're at is the location. Being close to where our first responders live is absolutely key to us being as quick as we are.
And if you were to ask a resident's going to tell you they love the fact that their fire department's right on 5, but they also love the fact that the police department's on 5.
I don't disagree one bit, but I see in communities where they put the fire station where it's financially convenient, they find some land on the outskirts of town, and it's easy to purchase, and they built some structure on it, and it takes the firefighters at least 10 minutes to get there. That's not productive for a volunteer fire department.
And my understanding is our response times of fire department and police are exactly the same. It's 2 to 3 minutes because of that location. I mean, if we were to call the police right now, I mean, we'd have to not count the chief because he's sitting here, but I guarantee a cop would be here in 2 minutes. And that's anywhere in the city. The fire department's the same way, and I can only vouch for that because I've been on a ride along with the chief's police department, and sorry, chief, but his guys beat you there. That time, correct, that time. To me, it's like, and I kind of like the fact that between fire and police, it's a race to see who gets there first, which, who in their right mind is going to complain about that as a resident in the city? You race all you want.
Of course, that's up here.
Yeah.
I just, I mean, I don't have a problem selling the building necessarily, or bringing the lease to $1, or, you know, what have you, but my main concern would be that we have to spend that money on the police building or the public works, and even if it's crowded right now, I mean, it's working, I mean, I bet you we could make it work for quite a while longer if we absolutely had to.
Not if the chief comes up to full staff in his police department. It's gonna overspill.
He's already got problems with secure storage for evidence.
We could go there right now and I'll get you in their secured storage.
Yeah.
It's true. We need something better.
We're going to go on to the last remaining items, and we'll circle back as we prioritize. So the other items that I have you don't have a memo. The first one is Heritage Boulevard and Eastwood intersection control. I know this was heavily talked about last year, and I do have good news to report that the draft study has been completed, and it was shown that there should be something is warranted there for some traffic control. So staff and the mayor will be meeting with the Isani County Highway Department and hopefully at least 1 or 2 commissioners to discuss the study and what the county is looking at doing, because now that they know that there is truly an issue that needs to be addressed. So once that happens, I will bring back more information to Committee of the Whole so you all can be aware. And at that time, when we find out what the county would like to do and what they will like to pay for, then we'll know what we need, what our obligation would be, and then we can move forward on what we want to do.
The good news is it's warranted.
Yes.
They believe a stoplight should be there.
The next item was the rate study. It had been shared that some council members wanted to reduce water, sewer, and storm rates. All of those will be looked at as we redo that rate study this year, and that rate study will be saving us money because staff, Mr. Becker, will be completing that study in-house. So come the middle of the year, we will start rolling that out. So we have what you've shared in mind, and we'll be bringing information forward to Committee of the Whole later this year. The next one was business marketing and acquiring businesses. It was shared that we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to get new businesses in, sell the lots that we have in our industrial park. Ms. Solomon has been doing a fantastic job communicating with businesses and working with some. Hopefully that'll be coming very soon. And we also do have a gentleman from the EDA will be coming to share with council in the upcoming months at EDA meeting about how it's not just getting businesses to you because they have some strict requirements to meet, but it's about also, and more importantly, they would argue, retaining the businesses that we have is very, very important. So I'd like council to start shifting and thinking about making sure we keep our fantastic businesses here. Anything on those items so far?
Nope.
The next one is reducing overall budget. So as we discuss items, it's very important, and we will keep in mind that we want to go with as low a cost as we can to reduce the overall budget over time and do less with more as we look through our operating and overall budget. The next one is water treatment. It was brought forward by a council member to look at how we do our water treatment. Councilmember Burgley, I'll let you speak on this more. I do have more information about the water that is sold at Coburn's, if you'd like to know that information. So just to give a background for the other council members, Councilmember Burgley was interested in knowing why, I don't know if necessarily why, but I'll just phrase it that way, why we fluoridate our water. And it is required by the Minnesota Department of Health that we do. Their standards have been lowered. We did an interim resolution a couple years back that we reduced it to 0.5 to 0.9 is what we include in our water. That is mandatory. We don't have a choice in that. It is for the health and safety, as the Department of Health has recognized, for people's, I think, oral health for our teeth and such. But when we did a random study over at Coburn's, they actually did have some fluoride in their water. I asked Public Services Director Sylvester to reach out to them, as it says that they don't add fluoride, which they don't add fluoride. They do a reverse osmosis process. However, there is trace amounts that they cannot guarantee that it does not have fluoride in it. So while their fluoride is much less than what the city's has, they do have some in there that, as you probably do know, there is natural fluoride in wells. We have it in our wells. So even if we didn't add fluoride, if we weren't required to, there would be fluoride in our water. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, my only point with this was that, yes, I knew there was fluoride naturally in the water. You know, if you look at, somewhere I read that it says not only do they add fluoride in the water for strong teeth, but they also add it for strong bones. And we're the only industrialized country in the world that I believe adds fluoride into their water. And for strong bones, it's just false, you know. So my point was just that, you know, I use fluoride toothpaste. I'm not saying fluoride doesn't have any value, but I don't think it has as much value as we put on it. You suggested I just go down and lobby the legislation, because you knew, I told you I knew that it was a state law. You know, my thing is, you know, and I recommend to my clients, hey, I recommend you go get reverse osmosis. And I realize reverse osmosis doesn't even take all fluoride out of the water. I'm not totally naive on this subject. And I know that even the dentists, when they put fluoride in your mouth, that suction there is to take the fluoride out of your mouth. They don't want you swallowing all that fluoride. And so I think there is such a thing as too much fluoride. I think that people that are in the know that if you do get too much fluoride, it can cause, there are studies that show it causes bone cancer. I haven't read them all. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on this, but I've read enough to be dangerous.
But the state regulates that, so.
No, I get that, but what I brought up a year ago, I don't know if you remember this, were you at the last goal state meeting with George? Anyway, Mayor Wimmer, we talked about it, and my point was just put a warning label on, you know, you can avoid fluoride by going and get water somewhere else. And I brought up pictures of Colburn's water. I brought a picture of even the gas station used to sell water treatment that was not only reverse osmosis, but they also had, they put light on it, and they pulled a lot of the stuff out of the city water that people don't want. And so I tell that to my clients. I just thought maybe that was something that the city should do. There have been other cities that have done that across the country. I don't know any in Minnesota that are doing where they said, you know, don't drink the fluoridated water. But that's my own hang-up, and that's my opinion. And I don't expect it to go anywhere because most people are on board. So I just wanted to state it for the record.
All right, if nothing further on that, if council has any other items to add that were not on our list, we can discuss those now. Otherwise, it will be to prioritize what was discussed today and give staff direction.
Anybody have anything new they want to add? With that being said, we need to prioritize these items, which they are 11 of them.
kind of picked my top three. I don't know how many you're looking for and how many you want me to prioritize, but I don't know. Number one for me would be reducing the overall debt or overall budget. And the second one would be the stoplight at the intersection on Heritage and East Dual Boulevard. And I think as far as the lighting infill, you know, I think those two could kind of go hand in hand. I think if we had a stoplight that we maybe wouldn't need to worry so much about the lighting infill out there on Heritage, because there really is no light out there right now. I mean, if somebody's walking, it's really hard to see them. But if you had a stoplight there, you know, you'd have a little bit more control on that traffic and walkways and stuff like that. But, and then number three for me was probably the housing study. I think but I know after we kind of talked about that, I don't know if that's quite as important maybe as I originally thought it was. But if it's something that's being asked for on a regular basis, then I think that would be my third priority. But those are my top three.
Councilman Burgley, do you have anything to suggest at this moment?
I certainly agree with reducing the budget, or reducing the debt, excuse me. But I think we have a plan in place for that, do we not, Mr. Becker?
We do.
So is that even on this? I mean, you can bring up whatever you want. I'm just wondering, is that a part of the thing to prioritize?
Well, that's what I was trying to say at the beginning of this meeting, that even if we were to throw some of these items into our budget at the moment, Mr. Becker still has a plan for reducing our overall budget.
And I'm just saying, to me, the most important thing is making sure that we stick to that plan.
There's no discussion on walking away from that plan.
I would
None.
certainly, yeah. I respect you for that. You're always
I'm
been,
just saying, adding things in will make a difference on that. And, I mean, I think there's certain things, obviously, that we need to spend money on, but I just would put the plan of getting out of debt and, you know, reducing our budget as my top priority, is all I'm saying.
Mr. Becker, can you add or comfort that thought? Or not?
Well, I think the right way to think about this is reducing debt is kind of one issue. Reducing budget, right? I think a lot of times council members, residents think about reducing the budget as, in the end, a bottom line understanding of, is the levy and the tax rate going down or up? And to that extent, if that is the metric, yeah, the more projects we add in, the more likely are to see that the levy go up, right? Kind of the fewer projects we undertake, the less likely that is to happen. It's kind of a risk mitigation thing. But to say that we can't add anything and still get debt-free by 2030, I mean, that type of an absolute statement, I wouldn't say would be entirely true, but we can get debt-free by 2030, but yeah, I mean, the more things you add, the more likely you are to see a tax levy increase or a tax rate increase while we move toward being debt-free.
So I guess my question would be is, do we want to wait 10 years to put anything in the city?
Yes.
Anything?
I would say yes.
Anything?
Well, I mean, I think we need a stoplight. I mean, that would be my second priority was the stoplight. I mean, I think there's certain things that we have to have that are essential parts of what we're doing, obviously, but I would say those are all secondary to the primary goal of.
But at the same time, you're not, I mean, you're adding, how do I put it? If you're going to group these together, you're only going to add it a smidgen compared to if you would do a project here, project there, project here. You know, that's probably going to.
And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place to do all those projects. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but Councilman Gordon, you're saying, let's put a stoplight in and we'll stop there. For 10 years.
yeah. Well, you said, is there anything you wouldn't add in? Well, I'm gonna go to 65 pedestrian overpass. I wouldn't add that in 10 years.
I would concur.
Okay. So there's one thing.
If I
So-
may, Mayor and Council, that's a great idea to let staff know that we don't want to keep bringing these things back.
That-
That direction is good as well, so if we could do that,
That-
that's very helpful.
I don't, if anybody disagrees, by all means, speak up, but I think the 65 pedestrian overpass, I think that's a dead issue.
Yeah.
I don't even have to ask Councilman Lundin, I know where he feels on that one.
And Mayor and Council, I'm going to ask Mr. Becker to talk a little bit of the debt that we have falling off, because while some debt may fall off, if we replace that, it still keeps that level. If you could talk on that a little bit.
We're not adding anymore. Good point. We're not adding anymore, we're just leveling.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a difference between maintaining a consistent debt levy and being debt-free, right? If we're debt-free, we have no debt levy, right? A lot of cities get into a cycle where they, when they issue new bonds, they do what is called a wraparound, where you modify the repayment schedule so that your new payments pick up just as past debt falls off. And so you kind of keep issuing debt over and over, and that debt levy just stays the same forever and ever. I would argue that once you get into that cycle, it can be really hard to get back out of that cycle. I'd also remind Council, from a few comments I've heard, is 2 points. Is what the plan we have in place to go debt-free includes a lot of expenditures. I mean, my workbook for the 20-year capital improvement plan already has thousands of cells and hundreds of expenditures. So it's not that we aren't going to do nothing. You know, the current plan already includes replacement and maintenance on everything in all the parks, right down to concrete curbing. I mean, literally those fine details are in there. But to that point, adding things like the amphitheater, you know, at least a couple council members have mentioned this during the meeting, is, you know, one good tact, if we say we value an amphitheater, is to say, what else is in that 20-year capital improvement plan that maybe isn't as big a priority? Maybe we move dollars rather than saying we're adding expenditures, right? Kind of reprioritize those things. That's another way to go through this list and think about that as well.
Thanks for getting that out of him, Miss Wood. I was trying to figure out how to get it out of him, but you did it for me, so thank you. So if we moved dollars around, I mean, it's not that we're,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some parks that maybe are not essential, that don't get
I would
used real
agree.
often, and, you know, if we can find those dollar amounts and stick with the plan of getting out of debt the way we have it currently, then I'm all
I
for
mean,
it.
I'm pretty confident, this is my opinion, but I'm pretty confident that there's a lot we could do on this list by moving money around and doing, hey, we're not going to use this money, so let's use it for this. I mean, we could get a lot of these things fulfilled.
I just want to pay off the debt, and I don't want to bond for things.
And I'm not, and that's what I'm trying to tell you, Councilman Gordon, is I'm not steering away from that plan. I'm on board with you. But there's still things we could do to make some of this happen. That's why Ms. Wood is asking for, did you say 3 or 5?
I think 325.
Yeah.
So-
So she was
and-
asking for 3 to 5 of your priorities. They would do their homework, they'd get the numbers, they'd come back to us. And if it was feasible, we go ahead. If it's not, then we kill that issue until the next goal setting.
To me, the most important things on the list are to deal with the fire, police, and public works issue.
I agree. And the liquor store, I'll throw that in there.
Well, that's my number 4.
I mean, I put public
gonna-
safety,
yeah.
building and
Yeah.
police as number 1.
I
That
was
mine.
gonna say, I sat 4 years on the liquor store committee, and I came to trust John. I heard Mr. Becker just be amazed at the numbers. Don sat in all the meetings, and Don seemed very pleased what was going on as well. And I'm not, if you guys are wrong, if I'm speaking out of turn for you guys, you go ahead and speak for yourself, but I'm just going by what I observed. So I trust John. Am I ready to spend the 30 grand? Maybe. I'm not completely on board yet, but I would consider it, because being in business, I spend money to make money, and the liquor store makes us money, and I think John has our best interest at heart, so I think anything that John comes up with, we have to at least consider, so. So those are my top four.
Councilman Lundin?
I'm gonna say the PRC community events, those are some items that I think they're just gonna happen. I mean, that's not really any, to me, consider as a goal right now. The housing study, that's another one that's just, it's gotta get done. I mean, we'll just have to take a vote on if we wanna spend the money on it or not. Lodging tax, like I said before, that was something that was discussed from day one on the hotel project. The fire station, the fire district lease and building and public safety are one lump number, in my opinion. The Heritage East dual intersection control, that's gonna happen, we just gotta find out how we're gonna come up with the funding for it. Utility rate study, that's something that's ongoing, that's not something we can consider. Visiting, business marketing, acquiring new businesses, that's another thing that's just going right along, so. But my number one is a performance amphitheater. I agree with Mr. Gordon, we need to keep our money down, but I think we can pull money from other resources to make this happen. This is something for the people. It's not for me. It's not for the staff. It's for the people in this community, the ones that are paying these bills. And I think that's something that's huge. The lighting infill, I think that's huge. You start getting on in some of these side streets, residential streets, and I think Chief Myers can contest to this. There's a lot of them that are pretty damn dark, and that's a safety issue, not just for the kids. It's for me. I hit that kid. Now I'm SOL. So I mean that's huge for the community again, also in that aspect. So the fire district and the public safety building, that's the next third one on the list for me. Reducing the overall budget, that's something that we should be doing all the time anyway. That's not even anything. That's just our natural job here. I'd like to see the dynamic sign, definitely. And I think we need to, the liquor store expansion kind of goes with the public works. I'd kind of like to bunch that all together because that's kind of all in the same nutshell. And there again, I'd rely pretty heavily on Mr. Becker, and that. And the liquor store expansion, I think we could start with Jason Cook and get a good start on that to look what we can do before we go spend $30,000. And as much as I hate to say it, I think we got to look at the splash pad eventually, sooner or later. But I say the lease, kind of more of a, where the fire district is more of a necessity now, but I think it's in a long-term goal with the public works and the police department, because we're not gonna bond $2.5 million. If Mr. Becker can find a way we can bond all this stuff together and make it happen sooner, I'm all for it. But they're not putting much more of a tax debt on anybody. I don't want to see taxes go up, because my taxes go up if taxes go up. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to run again this year for office, and I'm done. If I win this next election, 4 years, I'm out of here. I'm done. That's 14 years on this council. I've seen a lot of things come and go. I've seen a lot of stupid things spent money on that should have never happened. And we're stomaching it. We're still getting through with it. There's $1 million sitting over on the other side over on Broadway, where Penny Lane used to be, that I would have never in my life would have gone to do that. But we're still making our budget goal by even doing that, and we're not going to get 10 cents back on that. So I think we can make these things happen, like Mayor Johnson said. I think we can make these happen by diverting funds from something else. Lean heavy on Ms. Garvey on the parks. Find out which parks that aren't being utilized that we can do without. Maybe see if we can transfer into something else, or like the VFW one, maybe the VFW would be willing to step up and maintain that. We give it to them, and we can pull all that money out of there, and we can get something out of that, use that money for something else. But we got one of the most beautifulest parks in the world sitting over here, Bluebird Park, and I think we need to utilize that. You know, I honestly really do. I have said this, we're a community, but we do have to set ourselves apart from Cambridge. If we don't start doing things like this, you do something like this, the park, the amphitheater in there, it's gonna bring people here. Just like the movie, Field of Dreams. You build it, they'll come. If we do something to bring people here, that's gonna build this community even more. When you bring in more people, you're gonna bring in more business. That's a known fact.
They said you couldn't teach an old dog new tricks, too. He just used my line.
Yeah, but I mean, you just look at it. You bring in more people, you're gonna bring in business. And that's what we need to do. I hate to say it, I don't want, you know, I'd like to see Isani stay small, but we can always stay small government-wise and let this thing grow and become a better area for everybody. So.
And last but not least would be myself. I did bunch the fire, the liquor, and public safety and police. I bunched it all into one. I think it's all, if we make one move, we'll make the other move, and we'll make the other move. And I think there's something that can be done there. So to me, that was my public safety's been my priority since the beginning. It's going to be now, and it's going to be until I'm not sitting in this chair. Public safety is huge, whether it's police or fire. I think in order for them to grow and for us to grow, we need to give them a hand. So that was my number one item, was I kind of bunched all of them in together. The liquor store I threw in there because they're going to be in that mix. I think if we shifted and I'm not saying we're going to, but if we did shift where the fire department buys that building and we decided to build John a new building and we put the police over there, something somewhere somehow is going to work, is my point. So I think that project would be something that I would like to see keep moving forward. The second thing that I prioritized was in fact that amphitheater. I would have to agree with Councilman Lundin that if we build it, we're going to utilize the hell out of it. No matter if it's concert in the park versus on Main Street here, whether it's movies in the park, I think Miss Garvey will become the funner woman if we put that in her park. As much as, I mean, I was for that splash pad from the start, and then I kind of shunned away from it because I did see the price tag on it. But unfortunately, I would have to say that's going to have to be in there too. If we could bunch that performance arts center and that splash pad together, maybe that would work. I think some of these items we could put in as, you know, more than just saying, oh, we're going to build that splash pad. Well, why don't we build the performing arts and the splash pad together? We could save money that way, I would assume. Or we could save money by doing fire, police, and liquor store. I mean, there's something that can work some way, somehow here.
Yeah. So Mayor, what I'm hearing for the amphitheater is potentially adding that in, look at that for 2021 budgeting. So we look at it this summer, putting that in, but not changing really what we have in budget currently. So it's replacing something.
Correct.
Okay, the splash pad be a little different. We wouldn't couple those two together. The splash pad maybe for bonding reasons, for a big project we would look at if the council was interested when we do the public safety complex, so to say, at that time, whether adding it in, and Mr. Becker will come up with numbers of how that would change what we could.
And as far as my first item, the police, fire, and liquor store would probably be bunched together as well. We could work something out there.
Right.
That's what I mean, is we could take these items and bunch them together and probably come out with.
I would sure entertain.
We're shining, you know, we're taking a turd and turning it into gold, I guess is the way you could put it.
I would sure entertain the thought of somebody, I'm not smart enough in doing this, but if there's a way to do some searching for bonding, or not bonding, but grant writing, I would think there's got to be something in theater arts thing for the amphitheater. There's got to be something worded weirdly to grab onto that, and finding grant money for a lot of these things if we can.
Mayor and Council, no one did speak about the dynamic sign. Are we okay to leave that to push to 2021 goal setting, discuss it next year? If we want to do anything, not look at it this year?
I say
Do we
yes.
agree that?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
I would
You
also.
okay to
yeah.
wait one more year?
Off another year.
I mean, it should be kept on the radar. I mean, it really
I agree.
should.
It should be kept in the radar, but I don't know that 2020 is the year I want to look at it. 2021 would be better.
Okay.
I'm not steering away from it, though. I think it'd be kind of cool.
I'd like to say that if we're gonna group things together, I think I think a bathroom should go in the park before a splash pad, because I think the bathrooms are gonna be needed with a splash pad, so I would say if we're gonna build an amphitheater and we wanna do a splash thing.
We would do that in sections, Councilman Brigley. Like we said, we'd build the.
No, but you
I mean,
wanted to
we don't
group-
have to
you
put
wanted
all
to
this in
group
there
them
once.
You wanted to group them together. You wanted to group splash pad and amphitheater. I'd rather do amphitheater and bathroom first.
Yeah,
and
you
then-
just do it all three. Amphitheater, bathroom, splash pad. Done.
Okay, done. I vote yes.
And staff will look at with the amphitheater about adding the bathrooms in within that current budgeting, so.
Or
just to
piece it
recap,
together.
Going through the list, I hear the amphitheater we'll look at for budgeting, but not adding, but replacing something. Lighting infill, we'll look at also putting in within the budget, not doing a large amount, but little over time. So, Mr. Becker, we're just giving direction staff on these. Dynamic sign we'll bring back in 2021 for goal setting. Splash pad, we'll look at if we are to do bonding for a public safety building, that we would look at incorporating that in potentially, but those numbers will all be brought to committee of the whole to discuss. The pedestrian bridge overpass, we're done at discussing that. We're not going to move forward, nor do we want to bring it to another goal setting.
Done.
Park, rec, and culture community events, move forward with the list that Ms. Garvey has
They're just going to
presented.
happen. I think
And
you're going to get it, Ms. Gar. They're just going to, if you build it, they'll come. Like
she will
this.
bring more specifics, especially when it comes to like the fireworks one, the float, back to committee of the whole, or through park board, one of the two, for more specifics. But being that what she's presented is less than what we have budgeted currently, sounds like
The
that's
fireworks
in
ones, I
favor.
think you can call Chief Jankovic on that one, Ms. Garvey, and you'd get some help there, I bet.
The next one would be the lodging tax. Have staff look into specifics and bring that forward to committee of the whole if the council is interested in implementing something such as that. The housing study, looking at doing a joint regional study, and that would be a much lesser cost to the city, so it might be more palatable, that we see the benefit, yet we don't want to spend $20,000 on it, so staff will look into that. The Sandy Fire District lease and building, we'll look at that as a whole. We'll look at part of what we would do with public safety first, but also keep in mind that lease payment could be addressed throughout this year, but looking at options to potentially lease to own the building to them.
Absolutely.
Liquor store expansion, right now, we're gonna ask Jason to look into how large can our store expand and how large does the parking lot need to be. So we'll ask him to look into that further and present something to committee of the whole. Public safety building and PD already talked about, we'll look into potentially bonding, but not increasing the levy. If we want to do that over time, just putting numbers in front of you. Heritage Eastwell intersection control, everyone is agreeing that that is a very important issue, but once we have more information, we'll dig into further how much that will cost the city. Utility rate study is going to happen with staff's time. Business marketing, acquiring business will also be just occurring with staff time.
Keep plugging away, Ms. Selman.
Reducing overall budget, also concurrent with all of our items, making sure that we're doing that. Water treatment we've discussed, no need to bring further action back at another goal setting. And do I have that correct?
Sounds good to
You did
me.
a great job. Thank you, Ms. Woods.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
And thank you, staff. Everybody did a great job.
Thank you very much.
I make a
Mayor
motion to
Council.
adjourn.
Oh, if I could just for a second, I just want to make sure that staff doesn't have any questions for Mayor and Council on any of their items before we,
I appreciate you guys all showing up this evening, by the way. If you have any questions, speak now or I don't want to hear nothing.
Forever hold your peace.
I don't want to hear nothing. That's how I ended it. I'm kidding. I'm always here for you.
thank you.
Now I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councilman Lundin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Burgley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Therefore, we stand adjourned.